Hello everyone, I think we are on. If you can hear me and see me okay, let me know in the comments. Also drop a comment to say hello as well, I'll say hi back. So hello everyone and welcome to the wine list tasting of Beaujolais Nouveau. So welcome back to everyone who has done one of our live streams before and who is a subscriber, and welcome to those who are new if this is your first time doing one of our live streams with us, or if it's your first time doing any of the wine list tastings at all. So I'm Isabelle, it's lovely to meet you all, and I'll be talking you through our huge bottle of Beaujolais. So this is our bottle. It's absolutely enormous. It's a magnum, so that is 2 bottles inside 1 bottle, which makes it even more exciting and even better for a Saturday in November. So we're going to be talking about the bottle, we're going to be talking about the history of Beaujolais, what Beaujolais is, and we're going to break things down as well. So we're also, in a bit, not quite yet, but we're going to go through our tasting card. So if you all have your tasting cards with you, if you've had a long week at work already, you don't have to pick up the pen. We'll just talk about it. But what we'll do is we'll break it down, and by breaking it down, it really helps you to get your head around the wine, figure out what it is you like in it or what you don't like inside it. And that helps because once you figure out if you like a wine with high acidity or low acidity, it helps you to find new wines in the future, which is great, and that's exactly what we want. So we are going to firstly open the bottle, and the hardest part about opening this bottle is because it has a wax seal on it. So it's a very traditional thing that we have for the wax seal. And the reason why we have a wax seal is because in the olden days, before they invented corks, they wouldn't be able to seal their bottles, and you need to seal it properly from oxygen so that you don't get any oxygen going inside the bottle, because oxygen is a thing that ages a wine. So what you can do is you can go straight through with your corkscrew through the wax. It's a very, very soft wax. It's a bit like a baby bell wrapper really. But you go straight through it to open it, and you can just pull it out. You can try and peel off the wax sometimes, but it is incredibly difficult to peel off that wax on this bottle. And that's the best way to get into it. So the reason why they still have wax on bottles even though you've got a cork inside is because even though it's a traditional thing to have it on before corks, once they did invent corks, they haven't quite perfected the technique yet. So that was just a secondary seal to make sure no oxygen could possibly get through to the bottle. And they still do it sometimes today, just because not all corks are perfect. A wine can always become corked, but it just helps it a little bit extra. And even though this is a wine that's meant to be drunk young, it helps wines that are good for aging because it means that there won't be any damage to them at all. So if you can lift your bottle up with one hand, which I can't, got to use 2 hands, pour it away into your glass, have your first sip. Should we all toast? Cheers everyone. Happy wine list tasting. So I'll let you start drinking straight away while I chat about all things to do with Beaujolais. So now that you're into your bottle, thankfully, we'll talk about Beaujolais itself. So what on earth is Beaujolais firstly? Usually when you have French wines, they never ever say on their label what the actual grape variety is. So it's sometimes a bit tricky with that. It's basically a huge memory game when it comes to France. You have to memorise every single area and what grapes they're going to be most likely to grow there. So this one has Beaujolais Village across the front. And Beaujolais is the place, it's not the grapes, so it's the place. And I'll show you a little map just here. So we've got a map of France. And as you can see, there's Paris in the middle. And then you've got Bordeaux on the left, Burgundy there, Burgundy is some of the most expensive wines in France. It's a brilliant region. And at the very, very south of Burgundy is Beaujolais. So just below Beaujolais as well, it's sort of, Beaujolais is this tiny little region, and it's tucked in between 2 really expensive regions. So it's got Burgundy to the north and it's got Rhône Valley, so Côte de Rhône, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, Lirac, places right to the south, just below it as well. So even though it is a tiny region, it makes absolutely wonderful, wonderful wines. The grape variety that they use in Beaujolais is Gamay Noir. So Gamay Noir it's a grape variety that not many people have heard of, especially outside Beaujolais. You barely grow it anywhere outside Beaujolais. The only places you would get it are Switzerland and New Zealand. They're the two other places that grow it, but it's not very famous over there. Beaujolais is its home. So if we look into Beaujolais, as you can see on the bottle, it says Beaujolais Village on our bottle. So if we zoom into Beaujolais, and then this is it a little bit closer. So as you can see, you have at the very top, you have Juliana. So Juliana is at the very north up there. Then you have Saint-Amour. So these are basically all places within Beaujolais. You can see Beaujolais is the big orange area around it. And then you can see Burgundy and the grey at the top. And then these little places in the middle, these are the 10 cru of Beaujolais. So basically, when you have Beaujolais, it's sort of ranked, it's a hierarchy. So Beaujolais is the very bottom ranking. That doesn't mean it's bad, that still means it's very good. But that's basically anywhere, any of the grapes grown anywhere in Beaujolais can be called Beaujolais and will have Beaujolais on their bottle. When you sort of go up the hierarchy and it's fewer vineyards can have the name of Beaujolais Village on the bottle. So that's when the grapes start to get even better. That's better vineyards. So that basically means, I mean, let's have a look at a picture of Beaujolais to see exactly what it looks like. So it's very much rolling hills. It's very, very lovely, very pretty, very bucolic. So it's rolling hills, and each one of these hills will be slightly different for their vines to grow on. So you want your best vines to grow in the best spots on these hills. So when you have a valley, grapes don't grow very well down in that valley, nor do they grow very well when they're too high up and too exposed on the top of a hill. They want to be just perfectly in the middle. So when we have the Beaujolais at that bottom hierarchy, they're grown anywhere basically, anywhere where you can grow a good vineyard. Then the next step up with the Beaujolais Village, they're the ones on the nice little sides of the hills and mountains where it's just the perfect amount of sort of a slope. So they get a bit of rain, but the rain doesn't make it boggy, it just drifts off into the valley. And a lovely amount of sunshine as well, because if you're sort of in a valley, you might be shaded and in shadow from a hill. So on the side of the hill, that's when you're getting the best exposure to sunshine, because it's a warm region, but it's not the hottest region. Burgundy it's got lovely hot summers, but it does definitely cool down and drop down once it gets to sort of spring and autumn. It's not as nice. So when we go past, we've got Beaujolais Village when the vineyards are a bit better. Then we have our 10 crus, which we've been talking about. So our 10 cru are basically the best villages for growing grapes. And when it has a cru, that's when it has the village name on the bottle. So I'll talk you through those village names as well. I'll show you them again here. So at the top, we've got Juliana and Saint-Amour in the green there. So Saint-Amour, it means Saint Love really in French. And it's a perfect grape variety. It's a perfect village for Valentine's Day. So they're really famous for making red wines. And on Valentine's Day, everyone drinks them. Then further down, you have Chenin. Then you also have, if you can see on the left, there's Fleury. So Fleury is known for the more perfumed bottles. So if you see Fleury on the top of your bottle, it means it's an extra sort of perfumed, flowery Beaujolais. Then just on the right hand side, you've got Moulin-à-Vent, which means windmill, and Morgon. And these two areas are known for having much sort of riper, more masculine, more structured Beaujolais. So these are the sort of bigger, bolder ones. And then going down is Chirouble. And Chirouble it's actually quite high altitude in Chirouble. So it has quite high hills, and it keeps it, as you go higher up in hillsides, it gets cooler up there. So that's why when you see sort of mountains in England, if anyone's been walking recently, they'll always have snow on the very top because it's the coldest up at the top. So Chirouble being high altitude means that creates a fresher wine. So if you see a Beaujolais with Cheroux Blanc on the bottle, it's got a fresher wine. Then going further south, you've got Rosnier, then you've got Côte de Bruy and Bruy. And Bruy is basically, it's the biggest one, as you can see from that enormous size. So most of the bottles that you'll see from Beaujolais will probably have Bruy across them. So what do we have on this bottle? Can you see? So even though they only say Beaujolais Village on the bottle, which means that they've got good vineyards, but it's technically not inside the village boundary. But if you look at the very, very bottom where the writing is here, you can see the winemakers, Frédéric Cossard and Kevin Decombe. But then underneath, it's in Morgon, the village. So even though they can't put Morgon across the front of their bottle to say it's a Morgon wine, it's still grown around the village of Morgon. It's just not technically in the boundary. It's probably the field just after the boundary. So they can't put that on their bottle, but it does show. So when we're going through our cru, Morgon is the bigger, more masculine one. So we can see already what this wine is going to be like. So the reason why we are talking about Beaujolais today is because it was Beaujolais Nouveau Day. It's a huge festival of a day in the third Thursday of November, which was last week. So it's a huge festival in France, and what happens is in September you harvest all your grapes, and then in Beaujolais especially, they don't do this anywhere else, it's just in Beaujolais in the whole wide world, and they rush to get that first wine out. So they're pressing all their grapes, they're aging it, fermenting it, trying to create the perfect wine before they can bottle it on the, well, they bottle it the day before, the third Thursday of November, and at midnight on that night they can start to sell it. So everyone has a huge festival, starts drinking Beaujolais wine. And it's the first wine of 2020 that you can get in France. This is actually the first 2020 wine that I've had yet this year, so it's quite special. So you can see 2020 across the front there. So you can get, this is the first 2020 wine that you can get in the Northern Hemisphere when we have our harvest in sort of September. But people can still have their first 2020 wines if they've had it from the Southern Hemisphere. So wines coming from Australia and Chile, they're already coming out as the 2021. So it's very exciting when you start a new decade as well with the first bottle of wine of that decade on the front. It's such an exciting time. So the reason why, so Claire's saying she has a different Beaujolais cuvée. And, oh, I'm so sorry about that. So I have actually the Magnum. I feel like I'm showing off the Magnum now. I would share it around if I can. So if you have the normal size Beaujolais cuvée bottle, yours is, it'll still be the Beaujolais Nouveau. So with Beaujolais Nouveau, it's just been released on the third Thursday of November. So they've all just come out and they've just been sent over to us. So I'm really sorry that you might have a slightly different one there, but I'm sure we'll sort that out. So shall we start tasting our wines anyway? They will taste very, very similar, but please do ask away all your questions. Type in your comments what you can taste in this wine as well. So we'll start to break this down. And what you can do is, if you start off and if you pour your glass to about the widest part on the glass, and the reason why you do this is because you want the biggest surface area of wine possible to touch the glass, to touch the air, so you want it to start breathing, to start opening up. This wine's been made really quickly, so you want to get as much oxygen to it as you can. So you can even start swirling it around in your glass. You really want to open it up. It's a brand new wine, it's a bit youthful, so you want to air it out. The best way to swirl a wine is if you hold it on a flat piece of paper and then hold it like a pen. And you can just, I'll do it on my actual paper in case I spill this. And then you just draw a little circle with your glass and it starts to swirl it round, and then you can practice and go for a full swirl. So the reason why we're doing this is because you're opening it up with the air, letting it breathe. And at the same time, it's also coating the inside of the glass with that aroma. It's leaving the aroma in the glass. It's also leaving its aroma on all the particles of the air. So when you put your nose to the glass, because it's tapered up, it's trapping all those air particles, that smell of that aroma. So you put your nose to the glass, you should be able to smell it even more than you could smell it before. Oh, wonderful. So what we'll do is we'll start with the first characteristic. So we'll start with colour on this one. And we want to look at whether it's light or it's intense. So when you're looking at red wine, there's a few things we can look at. And the best way to look at it is, instead of holding it up to the light like they do in sort of TV programmes, that's just looking if it's clear, but it's red. It's not very clear. So if you hold it at a 45-degree angle over your piece of paper, and then you're comparing the colour of your wine to pure white, so it's pure brilliant white, and you can really start to see the colours inside this now. So you can see how vibrant this is. You can see it's incredibly intense, it's magenta, it's almost luminescent, it's an incredible colour. It'd make a very good sort of lipstick probably. But so we can already say, and the depth of colour as well, it's not just a sort of light, clear, see-through wine, it's definitely got that, it's got that body behind it as well. So I'm probably going to put more closer to the intense side on my scale. I've gone like 3/4 of the way up. Then with tannins, so we can measure our tannins inside this wine. And sometimes when you think of Beaujolais Nouveau, you just think of it, because it's so young, you think it surely must just taste like juice, because it's barely wine, it's straight from the vineyard basically. But if you take a sip now, and see how much it dries the side of your mouth out. So when you have tannins in red wine, you don't get tannins in white, but tannins in red come from the grape skin. So when you make red wine, you press the grapes down, you press them for the juices, and you're really pressing them into the skins. It has a maceration with the skin, so it means you're pressing it into the skin a lot. And that basically means you're getting body, colour and tannin from that. So we can see we've already got the colour. We'll find out about the body later. But now let's see if we've got tannin. Can you feel that drying the sides of your mouth out? Does it feel silky, or does it feel really grippy and harsh? Let me know in the comments how it's feeling. So it's quite, I'll take another sip. But it's got quite a lot of tannin there actually, which is very surprising sometimes. Because it's such a young wine, they do have extra tannins though, because those tannins haven't had time to sort of soften up, mellow a little bit, so they're still grippy and definitely there. And the fact that this wine has come from the village of Morgon, just outside the village of Morgon, it means that it's definitely going to be a bit more of a masculine wine anyway. It's going to be a bit bigger and bolder. So tannins, I'm going to go 3/4 of the way up as well. It's quite, maybe just past halfway. You can definitely feel that drying your mouth, and it really stays with you as well. Then when we measure acidity with wine, so acidity, we sometimes forget that red wine has acidity, but red wine needs acidity, because if you just had all those tannins and a lot of body and a lot of flavour, it'd feel like a bit too much. It'd feel like a bit of a punch in the face. You need to freshen it up with that acidity. So if you take a sip now, and then what you do is you sip it, swallow it, and then tilt your head forward, and you can do it with your mouth open if you want, which is called the dribble test, to see how quickly you need to close your mouth before you're going to dribble. Or you can do it in the more subtle way, where you close your mouth and see how quickly your mouth is starting to fill with saliva. So how quickly is this one? Is it happening straight away? Is that mouth watering straight away? Is it having a bit of delay before it starts to water? Is it watering a lot? Is it watering not very much? I think my mouth is definitely watering with this one. I'd say it's about medium, maybe a little bit past medium acidity with this. And that's really nice, because to say that our, medium tannin rather than high, Helen says, yeah, medium with a little, I've got a millimetre or two just after medium. You can definitely feel it there though, can't you? So it's, that's classic with brand new wines, so they have a lot of that tannin there. But because we've got that acidity there as well, and it's almost matching up to it, it's balancing it out. And that's one of the ways to measure a good quality wine, when you have balance inside the wine. So because the tannin is drying your mouth out, and the acidity is making your mouth water. It's like two things are going on at the same time. So it's like they're balancing with each other, going next to each other. And it makes it much nicer, because sometimes when you get a high acidity, a high tannin wine without the acidity, they are what we call really, really good food wines, because tannin with food is wonderful. When you have any sort of succulent, juicy food, so something like roasted meats, like a steak, when you have sort of oily roasted vegetables or any sort of fatty cheeses, they really balance tannin out inside your mouth. It works wonderfully together. The saltiness as well. So they're all really succulent foods, and the tannin just cuts straight through with its really sort of drying feeling and sensation in your mouth. So that's why tannin is really nice with food, but acidity makes it a lot easier to drink. Acidity makes it more like a drink that you don't need to have food with it. You can just sit there and sip on this one, sip away. You want what we call, my favourite phrase, an easy drinking wine. So let's measure sweetness on this wine as well. So is this wine sweet or is it dry? Because it has had barely any aging to it, it's literally just come off the field basically. So you wouldn't think that it's going to have too many sort of complex flavours yet. You'd think it'd still be quite young and juicy and vibrant. So do you think it's sweet or dry? I'm going to say with this one, it's definitely a dry wine, but it can be confusing sometimes because you can smell those really ripe, sweet fruit flavours inside it, but you're not actually tasting any sweetness. So it's only a tiny, tiny amount of sugar, probably a couple of milligrams per litre, which is barely anything. But that sweet smell that's coming off it can throw you off. So that's why if you have a cold, you can't taste wine as well if you have a cold. So you can taste it better though for sweetness, you can measure it better. So if you pinch your nose and take a sip of your wine now, you can definitely tell that it's a dry wine. It's the smelling of the wine that makes you think it has a little bit of sweetness. Most of our tasting of wine comes from, 90% comes from just smelling the wine. And that's why our wine glasses are shaped like this, so you can fit your nose inside as you're having a sip. So you're smelling it in, breathing it in as you're tasting it. And when you're breathing it in, it's a little place in your brain called the olfactory centre. And that's what's taking the information coming from you smelling it in and sort of turning it around, making your brain process what you're actually tasting and smelling there. So, dry wine and body on this wine. So body, we can measure it. It's a lot easier to measure body with a red wine than it is with a white wine. Firstly, we can look at it. When we looked at that colour earlier and we were seeing whether you could really see through it or whether it was quite opaque, that's starting to measure body on a wine. So you can do that by just looking at it. There are a few exceptions. You can have some very sort of light coloured wines that are really full body still, but usually you can tell a bit. And then you can taste it. So taste it, have a sip, have a big sip, have a few sips if you want. And what happens is you can feel that on your palate. It's rather than tasting the body, you feel it. It's like the difference between milk. Imagine you've got 2 glasses of milk in front of you. One is skimmed milk, one is full fat milk. And imagine how different they would feel as you're drinking it. They taste the same, but they feel very different. Skimmed milk is very clean and cutting. It's like water, it just cuts through. But full fat milk, it sits really rich and heavy and fatty on your palate. It just sits there nicely. And so the difference between the two of them, that's like having light body and full body. So you can be somewhere in the middle, like a semi-skimmed milk really. But where do you think we are with this one? I'd say that's it's somewhere in the middle, that one. It's a bit like a semi-skimmed milk, which is what we thought from the colour of it as well, because you can see through it a little bit. It's not completely opaque. You can do the test by holding your hand underneath on the stem. And if you can see your hand, it means it's usually light in body and quite clear. If you can't see your hand at all, that means it's very full in body. If you can kind of see your hand, which I can kind of see my hand with this one, then it usually means it's medium body. So all those things together, say it's a medium body wine, this one. And the last one on the characteristics at the top here is finish. So finish is another, when we talked about balance, which is a way to measure quality of wine, finish is another ways to measure quality of wine. And it's how long that length of wine is. So after you take your last sip, how long can you still feel that taste on your palate for? How long is it really staying with you? It is sometimes hard to sort of pinpoint the exact time that you stop tasting something. So a wine doesn't just go, you stop tasting it. It sort of peters off really slowly. So you just have to pick the right one to go for. So this one is about, say it's about 5 seconds, this one. It's maybe 5 going on for 6 seconds possibly, but because it's a young wine, that's only a medium length really, but because it's a young wine, it hasn't quite got that full potential to try and sort of go for the full 10 seconds or even full 5 minutes that it can possibly get to. So those are our characteristics. If you did feel slightly different on those characteristics, everyone tastes slightly differently. So some people are more perceptive to acidity. Some people are definitely more sensitive to tannin as well. So everyone is slightly different with tasting. We're all built completely differently. But a good way to do things with this is knowing what you're more sensitive to, which one you can get the best. And it's calibrating it with other people as well. So I always taste, I always get a sense of smell. So when you hold a wine like this, we always have to test to see how strong the smell is. And I can always get that straight away and I go, really, really intense, that one. And then my wine teachers would always say, it's not that intense, you're wrong. So I'd calibrate what I was smelling with what everyone else was. So it was basically shifting mine down to other people. So what I was smelling is really strong was just average for some people. So it helps you a little bit, because then when you go to a restaurant and you're asking for a wine, or you're in a wine shop and you say, can I have something with high acidity? If your sense of acidity is sort of higher up there, then they might give you something completely different to what you actually want. But if you calibrate it, figure it out with everyone else, and then they can get exactly what you want to go for. Helen is saying medium plus acidity, medium tannin, feels quite light, medium finish. Absolutely, it's all quite medium in terms of that. Because you have a slightly different wine, I feel like that body might be slightly lighter. If it's not from Morgon, the area, Morgon always adds a bit extra body to a Beaujolais usually, so it might be a slightly lighter body, that one. So, shall we talk about our aromas? We have 2 different circles. So the reason we have 2 different circles is the first circle is sort of naturally occurring fruit flavours. So it's things like apple, pear, lime, lychee. They're all on the right hand side for sort of white wines, but we're going to be on the left hand side for this one. It's usually your red fruit flavours are in red wines, and on the left hand side, so we've got things like figs, plums, red cherry and red currants. Every single wine that you will ever have will have some sort of fruit flavour going on inside that wine. If you smell a wine, it doesn't have any fruit flavour that you can smell or even taste, it usually means your wine's gone off. It might start to smell like wet cardboard then. But because this circle is sort of your main aromas, these are ones that are coming from the actual grape itself. So you can pick grapes from a vineyard, press them into a wine, and they will smell of some sort of fruit. It's not that there's any fruit in it, it's just to do with the concentration of sugars inside that grape, which starts to remind you of fruit aromas once it's been fermented. So what can you smell and taste inside this one? I'm definitely getting sort of tart cherries, really tart cherries. Brand new fresh cherries, raspberry, cranberry. You can always go with flavours that aren't quite on the circle, but it's a lovely guide to sort of give you out the red cherry, the strawberry, maybe a bit of blueberry as well, you know, that tanginess coming from a blueberry. So I'm also getting a little bit of the floral element just at the top of this circle up here. So there's elderflower, rose and violet, and I think out of those 3 I'm leaning more towards violet inside this. It's really quite perfumed. I mean, it looks like violets almost because it's so sort of purplish and young and vibrant just in the colour. But yeah, violets on this. The classic flavours that you get inside Beaujolais wines are usually strawberries, raspberries, getting both of them. And also the bizarre one that you usually get inside a Beaujolais is bubblegum. Bubblegum sounds bizarre, but I mean, we all love bubblegum, it's fantastic. And can you smell bubblegum inside your wine? I think I can a little bit. Really sort of tangy, bright red fruits, bubblegum-like. It smells so sweet, so when we were talking about that sweetness before, because it's smelling so sweet, you can really get that bubblegum on it. Not that you can taste the sweetness. Yeah, definitely bubblegum inside this, really sort of bright, fresh perfume. Ooh, Helen is getting strawberry, red currant, rose and violet. Absolutely beautiful. And they're classic Beaujolais flavours. So when you have a Beaujolais Nouveau, which is what we have here, the youngest sort of Beaujolais, they're always young, fruity flavours, and that's, yeah, exactly, the rose, the bubblegum. When the Beaujolais start to age, so when you get sort of the ones with the village name on, it has the village name on when it has been aged as well. So because it's in a cru area, you have to follow certain rules and age them as well. So you can only call it Beaujolais Nouveau if it's been from Beaujolais or Beaujolais Village. And then the ones where it has a village name on, they start to be less bright strawberries, less like what we have here, that lovely sort of bright, fresh strawberry bubblegum. And it starts to age more slightly, but I think this is a wonderful one. So is anyone getting any flavours from the second circle as well? The second circle, this is where it starts to get more complex, and these are the more bizarre flavours like cinnamon, toast, hazelnut and stone inside here. And these are flavours that the winemaker has to actively make a choice to get these flavours. So he has to do a different style of fermentation or some barrel aging or just aging in the cellar. By aging it in the cellar, it starts to muster up all these new flavours. So I love what Helen's just written. She put a foam banana, like the banana sweets. I love that. Yeah, really, really sweet smell basically. So I don't think we have any of these second circle flavours, and that's because it is such a young wine, so it hasn't had that time to age in the cellar. It hasn't had that time with sort of barrel aging either. So we're definitely sticking with this first circle. And there is nothing wrong with wines that stick to the first circle. We usually call them wines that they don't have complexity, but they're bright, they're youthful, they're fresh, and they're really enjoyable as well. They're one of those wines that you can just sit and sip. Beaujolais is usually known as a summer afternoon wine, and you can see why, because we're getting the bubblegum, foam banana, strawberry. It's all those lovely sort of summery flavours. But what I really love about Beaujolais is it's really, really good with wintry foods. So if you're pairing it with foods over this winter, it goes really well with nut roast. It goes really well with sort of cold cut meats. It's almost acting as like a chutney on a cheese board with those meats. It's just being like a cranberry sauce to go with everything. So it's really bright, lively, livening up everything inside, everything with the food. The wine's acting as that. And then you can also have it with, so brie is perfect with this wine because again, it's acting like a chutney. The tannins in this wine are perfect because all those sort of succulent things that you're getting, the tannins are just cutting through it really, really nicely as well. One of the reasons why we have such amazing flavours and such bright flavours going on inside Beaujolais is because their soil variety is actually not that good. It doesn't have many nutrients inside it. It's granite soils, and granite soils don't have many nutrients inside them, which means when you plant the vine, the roots dig down looking for all those nutrients but can't really find too many. So it's actually very good because if the vine can't find too many nutrients, it produces fewer fruits, and that's a good thing. If you have one vine and you have 10 bunches of grapes on the vine, it means that all the nutrients that it's getting, all the sugars, all the water from deep down in the soil, all that sweetness that it's going to create are being spread out between those 10 bunches of grapes. But if that vine is only creating 5 bunches of grapes because it's realised that it's going to struggle a little bit perhaps, then all those nutrients and sugars are concentrated down into half as many grapes because there's only half as many to share it around. So all those grapes are having twice as much intensity of flavour, sugar, nutrients inside there. So in Beaujolais, the Gamay grape variety that is grown there is quite low yielding. So basically it's not growing as many grapes, but each one of those grapes is going to be incredibly intensified. This also happened in New Zealand with Sauvignon Blanc. So if you have Sauvignon Blanc throughout the world, it's lovely, it's juicy, it's vibrant. But if you have it in New Zealand, it suddenly goes twofold. It starts to taste like passion fruit. And it's done a very similar thing to Beaujolais, basically. Their vines are really struggling in the soil down there. When they first brought Sauvignon Blanc down to New Zealand from France, they planted it and the grape was really struggling and would send out an alert signal to say it's struggling, it can't survive there. So it would hope that people would, or animals would, realise that these grapes are really, really sweet and juicy and vibrant, pick them, eat them, take them with them somewhere and replant them somewhere else where it would have better soils. So it's basically an alert signal. So that's why it creates such juicy, vibrant grapes that make such a full, juicy wine full of passion fruit. And the same is happening in Beaujolais here. So the vine knows that it can't survive there that well, so it's trying to create a few really juicy grapes to try and hopefully get someone to plant them somewhere else. But that's not happened. We like to keep it in Beaujolais because we like that juiciness in the grapes. That's why we're getting the banana, the bubblegum, the strawberry, and Helen's put a bit of cinnamon as well. That little spice to it. And as we know, cinnamon is one of the second circle, if you can see it. It's in the second circle over here, one of those aromas, just on the right hand side where the sweet spice is. So yeah, bit of cinnamon, that sort of sweetness, almost like a Christmas spice. And again, that's why this wine is so good with sort of this time of year. Even though this wine is really good with lots of wintry foods, cheeses, charcuterie boards, cold cut meats, nut roast, it is also really good to have with desserts. So because it tastes like sweets and it has those bright, vibrant, juicy fruit flavours, it's almost like Black Forest fruits. And then you can have it with chocolate or chocolate cake and it's like a Black Forest gâteau all of a sudden. Even though it has tannin, if your cake is juicy enough, as long as you're not like me and make dry cakes, as long as it's juicy enough, that tannin will sit really nicely with it. So you can have sort of chocolate cake, juicy fruit berries all over it with Christmas and a dry red wine. Be absolutely wonderful. So, does anybody have any more things that you're smelling inside the wine? Anything you can notice about it? It's wonderful. It's so Beaujolais Nouveau is, most people will drink it within these next 2 weeks really. It's one of those wines where you want to get it out straight away. You want to really sort of drink it while it's still young. And it's not one of those wines that you do want to age. It's one of those wines that are best, they're meant to be young, they're made to be young. It's a wine that could do with, I usually don't say decanting, but it's a wine that could do really well with decanting. When you have a very young wine with these really grippy tannins, you can sort of start to decant it, and by mixing it with air, it starts to soften those tannins. But yeah, you want to drink it young, you don't want to age one like these. We're actually planning to have a Beaujolais Nouveau festival. We were planning to have one this year, but we were going to join in with France, do a whole Beaujolais Nouveau festival where we have winemakers come and visit us. We're going to put food on, we're going to have lots of wine tastings, and we're going to organise it for next Beaujolais Nouveau tasting. So because we couldn't do this one, we will do next year, 2021, and we're going to do a Beaujolais Nouveau festival day. So it'll probably be down in London. And we will get the very, very first Beaujolais Nouveau, which they can only send us probably at midnight. And then we'll be pairing it with lots of this sort of wintry foods that we're talking about, so it'll be absolutely perfect with it. Claire has asked if we should chill this wine. So Beaujolais is one of those wines that you can chill. Because it's such a light wine, it's got those wonderful, young, vibrant fruit flavours. It works really well as a chilled wine as well. If you have one of those aged wines where you're getting a lot of those aromas from that second circle of aromas where you're getting sort of cedar and chocolate and sort of gamey flavours, you don't want those cold because you lose some of that complexity. But because it's so young, you can have it chilled. Red wines should be served between about 16 and 18 degrees, so usually just below room temperature basically, and that keeps them nice and fresh. But with Beaujolais, you want to chill it down to between about 12 and 14 degrees, which is the same temperature that we have full-bodied white wines for. So it does a few things when you chill it down, and one of the main things that you get behind it is you notice less alcohol inside the wine. The alcohol is definitely still there, but you perceive less alcohol. So when you're drinking it, it feels juicier, it feels younger, it feels really easy drinking, possibly even too easy drinking. You can measure the alcohol in this wine by taking a sip, and then that little burn that you feel in the bottom of your throat here, that is how you feel the alcohol. So you know when you drink a whiskey and you feel that little burn there from the whiskey because they're really high alcohol. It's not going to be quite that strong. But if you take a sip, notice it, and you can feel that little burn there. So if you put that in the fridge, you will be able to, it'll be an easier drink. You'll notice less of that little alcoholic burn. It'll make it feel more elegant. It'll bring out more of the vibrant fruit flavours inside it and sort of perk those up. And it's really good, when we're saying about the chocolate with this wine, it's really good to have with desserts wines if you're going to chill this wine. So it is nice to chill it in winter, even though we like a warmer drink in winter to sort of warm us up. It's lovely in winter with desserts. And it's great, this is why you can have it still in summer, possibly not a Beaujolais Nouveau, but more of the Beaujolais when they're a little bit older. And they're wonderful to have in summer because then you can have it chilled and you can be on a really hot day with a nice chilled glass of wine. Even though it's red, it still works just as well. In Spain, in Rioja, they usually have their paella, and they have it in the middle of summer still, but they want it with a red wine because it's going to pair perfectly with a red wine, so they still chill their red wines. Even if it's a really sort of big aged Rioja, they still chill it just because they know it'll match so well. So it's one of those wines that'll really go well with a barbecue. When it's a really hot day, you want something cool, but you're having lots of sort of cooked meats with it as well. It goes absolutely perfectly. So, does anybody else have any more questions about this Beaujolais that we're drinking? Feel free to put it down in the comments below, but thank you so much for all your comments so far. They've been absolutely wonderful. I hope you enjoyed the Beaujolais. It is one of my favourite wines, and I always recommend, when people aren't a fan of red wines usually, I always recommend that you start with a Beaujolais because they are just so juicy and vibrant. They feel more like, especially when you chill them, they feel more like a white wine sometimes. So please do type in if you have any more questions. But the main thing that we need to do on our little tasting card is fill in the verdict at the top. So we have a little blank face, and we can put a sad face if we don't like it. We can put a smiley face if you do like it. You can put a confused face if you're not sure yet. But I am going to put a big smiley face. I don't know if you can see that, but I put a big smiley face because Beaujolais Village is wonderful. It's very delicious. But thank you so much for coming to the wine list tasting tonight. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch and ask us about the Beaujolais that we've had tonight. But thank you so much for coming. And if you're watching this at another time, thank you so much for watching our YouTube. But thank you everyone, and take care, enjoy the rest of your wine, and make sure you drink a glass of water before you finish the bottle. Thank you so much everyone, bye.